My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a data analyst for a mid-sized tech company. I remember the exact moment Mark, my stepfather, said those words to me, because my cheek was still stinging, and I could feel the metallic tang of blood where my lip had split. We were in the backyard, the scent of damp earth and late-blooming jasmine heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the violence that had just erupted. He'd just backhanded me, sending me stumbling against the weathered oak picnic table, and as I pushed myself upright, my eyes narrowed, he stood over me, his face a mask of cold fury. "Go on, tell your mother," he sneered, his voice low and menacing. "You won't see anything. Nobody will. You think anyone will believe you?" He gestured vaguely at the house, then at the empty expanse of the yard, as if to emphasize his control. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known in that moment, was that his own obsession with security had already betrayed him. That small, blinking eye of the backyard cam, which he'd installed himself, had seen everything. And soon, so would everyone else. To understand how we got to that moment, you need to know about Mark. He entered my life when I was 12, a charming, attentive man who swept my mother, Sarah, off her feet after my father passed away unexpectedly. For years, she'd been adrift, and Mark, with his booming laugh and seemingly endless confidence, felt like a lifeline. He was a successful real estate agent, always impeccably dressed, with a knack for making people feel important. At first, he was wonderful to me too, buying me gifts, taking me to baseball games, and listening patiently to my preteen dramas. He promised stability, a new chapter, and for a while, it felt like he delivered. But as the years went on, the charming veneer began to crack. His confidence curdled into control. He started with small things, like rearranging the furniture without asking, or insisting on specific brands of groceries. Then it escalated to dictating my mother's outfits, monitoring her phone calls, and subtly undermining any independent decisions she tried to make. He'd always say it was for her own good or to keep things organized. My mother, so desperate for peace and afraid of rocking the boat, would just nod and comply, her eyes losing a little more of their sparkle each time. I, being a teenager, was more rebellious. My defiance was met with icy glares, cutting remarks about my intelligence or my future, and eventually, a cold shoulder that could last for days. He never hit me then, not directly, but the emotional abuse was a constant, suffocating presence. After I left for college, the distance provided some relief. I'd call my mother, and she'd sound tired, sometimes whispering about Mark's latest rules. He'd installed a sophisticated security system, complete with cameras covering every angle of the house and yard. He claimed it was for safety, given the rising crime rates in our suburban neighborhood, but I suspected it was just another extension of his control. He even had a specific, gaudy garden gnome, a fisherman with a bright red hat, placed directly in the line of sight of the backyard cam, as if to test its field of vision. It was a small detail, but it always irritated me, a symbol of his petty dominance. I moved back home briefly after graduating, saving up for my own apartment. That's when I truly saw the extent of it. Mark had become an absolute tyrant. One evening, my mother made a casserole that wasn't to his liking. He didn't yell, but he pushed the plate away with such force it clattered across the table, scattering food. He then stood up, walked to the fridge, and threw out all the leftovers, explaining in a calm, measured voice that such incompetence was unacceptable. My mother sat there, staring at her untouched plate, her shoulders slumped. I saw the fear in her eyes, a fear that had replaced the warmth I remembered. That was when I realized this wasn't just about control, it was about crushing her spirit. A few months later, I found a great apartment and moved out, but I still visited my mother often, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Each visit was a tightrope walk. Mark viewed my presence as an intrusion, a challenge to his absolute authority. He'd make passive-aggressive comments about my career choices, my single status, or my liberal views. My mother would try to mediate, her voice soft and apologetic, which only seemed to fuel his contempt. I started noticing that he would often forget to include me in family plans, or conveniently schedule events when he knew I was busy. He was slowly, deliberately, trying to isolate my mother from me, just as he had from her friends. The tension escalated rapidly after I offered to help my mother manage her finances. She had a small inheritance from her sister that Mark had been investing for her, but she'd mentioned she hadn't seen any statements in over a year. I'm a data analyst, numbers are my language. I offered to help her set up a spreadsheet, just to track things. Mark overheard this during one of my visits. He turned on me, his face suddenly devoid of any pleasantry. My wife's finances are my concern, Eleanor, he said, his voice low and dangerous. She trusts me. Are you implying she shouldn't? My mother immediately jumped in. No, Mark, of course not. Eleanor was just trying to help. But the damage was done. He saw my offer as an attempt to undermine his control, to expose something he didn't want exposed. The next time I visited, a week later, I found my mother in tears. Mark had locked her out of her own email account, claiming she wasn't careful enough with passwords. He'd also changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to give it to her, saying she used too much data. He wanted her completely dependent. I tried to speak to him calmly. Mark, this isn't right. Mom needs access to her own accounts. He looked at me, a cold, predatory glint in his eyes. You think you know what's right, little girl, he scoffed. You think you can tell me how to run my house? You're a guest here. A very ungrateful guest. He then accused me of trying to turn my mother against him, of being a spoiled brat who couldn't stand to see her mother happy. That was the argument that led to the backyard. I stood my ground, refusing to back down. I told him he was isolating her, controlling her, and that it wasn't love, it was abuse. The word abuse seemed to trigger something primal in him. His face contorted, and he lunged forward, grabbing my arm. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger. He dragged me towards the back door, intending to throw me out, but I stumbled, catching myself on the doorframe. As I regained my balance, he shoved me hard, sending me sprawling out onto the patio. I landed awkwardly, scraping my knee, and before I could even fully stand, he was on me, his hand raised. The first hit was a slap across my face, ringing in my ears. Then came the backhand, splitting my lip. That's when he uttered those chilling words, "You won't see anything. Nobody will. You think anyone will believe you?" He stood there, breathing heavily, convinced he had just proven his point. My immediate reaction was a surge of white-hot fury, but I bit it back. I knew I couldn't fight him physically. I just nodded slowly, looking him dead in the eye, and then my gaze flickered past him, to the corner of the house. There it was, the little dome of the backyard cam, nestled under the eaves, perfectly positioned. And right in its foreground, the ridiculous red-hatted garden gnome, a silent, painted witness. Mark, satisfied with my apparent submission, turned and went back inside, slamming the door. I stood there for a moment, the blood trickling from my lip, the ache in my cheek throbbing. My mother hadn't appeared. She must have heard the commotion, but she hadn't come out. The recognition hit me then, sharp and painful, she was too afraid. I was on my own. I walked numbly to my car, got in, and drove straight to my apartment. The first thing I did was take a series of clear photos of my injuries, the reddened handprint on my cheek, the swollen, split lip, the scrape on my knee. Then, I pulled out my laptop. Mark had installed the security system himself, a popular brand that streamed footage to a cloud server accessible via an app or web portal. He was particular about his tech, always upgrading, always ensuring he had the latest version. What he didn't know was that I had seen him input the default password when he first set it up, several years ago, and being a data analyst, I had a memory for patterns. It was a simple, common sequence, easily guessable if you knew his habits. I tried it. It worked. My heart pounded as I navigated the interface. I found the feed from the backyard cam for that afternoon. There it was, the whole brutal exchange, from his initial lunge, to the shove, to the 2 blows. The audio was clear, capturing his menacing words, "You won't see anything. The garden gnome, still and bright, was in the frame, a surreal anchor to the violence. I downloaded the clip, then immediately changed the password to something complex and random, effectively locking him out of his own system. He would notice eventually, but by then, it would be too late. I emailed the video to myself, to a trusted friend, and saved it to an encrypted drive. The next morning, I called my mother. Her voice was thin, apologetic. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. Mark was he was stressed." I cut her off. "Mom, he hit me. He beat me. And I have proof." There was a long silence on the other end. What are you talking about?" she finally whispered. "The backyard cam, Mom. It recorded everything. I have the video." Another silence, even longer this time, filled with a sound like a quiet sob. "Oh, Eleanor," she finally choked out. "Oh, my God. I told her I was going to the police. And that she needed to decide if she was going to continue living with a man who did this. I didn't demand anything from her, just stated the facts. I went to the local police station and filed a report. The officer, a kind woman named Officer Miller, listened patiently as I recounted the story, showing her the photos of my injuries. When I showed her the video clip on my phone, her expression hardened. "This is clear evidence, Ms. Vance," she said, her voice firm. "We'll be taking this very seriously." She explained the process. They would contact Mark, issue a temporary restraining order, and begin an investigation. She also advised me to speak with a lawyer about a permanent restraining order and potential charges. A few days later, my mother called me, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. She had confronted Mark. She told me he had initially denied everything, then tried to manipulate her, saying I was lying, that I had always hated him. But she had seen the video herself. I had sent it to her after my police report. Seeing it, hearing his words, watching him hit her daughter, it had finally broken through years of denial. She told him she was leaving, and that she wanted a divorce. He had raged, threatened, but she held firm. The police had also paid him a visit, serving him with the temporary restraining order. He was furious, but the evidence was undeniable. The legal process took months. Mark tried to fight the restraining order and the divorce, but the video evidence was irrefutable. My mother, with the support of a good lawyer and finally free from his constant surveillance, found her voice again. She testified about his controlling behavior, his financial manipulation, and the years of emotional abuse. The divorce was messy, but she eventually got a fair settlement, including the house, which Mark had tried to claim entirely. He lost a significant portion of his real estate business due to the scandal and the restraining order. His carefully constructed image of a successful, upstanding businessman shattered. I still have the video. Sometimes, late at night, I watch it. I see Mark's sneering face, hear his arrogant words, "You won't see anything." And then I see the little red-hatted garden gnome, standing perfectly still, silently recording the truth. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, evidence can be found, and justice, however slow, can prevail. My relationship with my mother is healing. We're talking, really talking, for the first time in years. She's slowly rediscovering herself, taking up old hobbies, and making new friends. As for me, I learned that some battles aren't fought with fists, but with patience, observation, and the cold, hard truth of data. The garden gnome is still in the backyard, but now, it's just a gnome.